My name is Maria Santos, and for 2 years, I watched my son fall in love with a woman who thought I was the hired help. It started on a rainy Thursday evening in October 2022, when my son Carlos brought Ashley Monroe home for dinner. Carlos was 28, working as a software engineer in downtown Seattle, and I could tell by the way he kept adjusting his shirt and checking his reflection in our hallway mirror that this woman was important to him. Ashley was 26, with perfectly styled blonde hair that caught the light just right, designer clothes that probably cost more than I made in a week, and the kind of confident smile that suggested she'd never met a situation she couldn't handle with charm and determination. She carried herself like someone who'd never had to worry about money, never had to choose between paying rent and buying groceries, never had to explain why she couldn't afford something everyone else took for granted. "Mom, this is Ashley," Carlos said as he helped her out of her expensive-looking coat, a wool blend that I recognized from the Nordstrom windows downtown. "Ashley, this is my mother, Maria." "It's so wonderful to meet you, Mrs. Santos," Ashley said, extending a perfectly manicured hand with nails that probably cost more than my monthly phone bill. "Carlos talks about you constantly. He absolutely adores you." I shook her hand, immediately noticing the way her eyes quickly and systematically scanned our modest living room. I watched her take in the second-hand furniture that I carefully selected from estate sales and thrift stores, the family photos and mismatched frames that I collected over 28 years of being Carlos's mother, the small television that worked perfectly well despite being 5 years old, and the general feeling of a home that was deeply loved but definitely not luxurious. Her smile never wavered, but I caught something in her expression, not quite disapproval, but a subtle recalibration of expectations. I had seen that look before, in the homes of my wealthiest clients, when they realized that their cleaning lady had opinions, education, or interests beyond scrubbing their bathrooms. "Please, call me Maria," I said warmly. "And welcome to our home. I hope you're hungry. I made Carlos's favorite tonight, arroz con pollo." "That sounds absolutely wonderful," Ashley replied, though I caught the slight hesitation in her voice when she heard the Spanish name for the dish. It wasn't discomfort with Spanish exactly, but more like the pause of someone who wasn't sure if she should pronounce it correctly or pretend she didn't know what it was. Over dinner, served on my good plates that I'd bought one at a time whenever they went on sale, I learned that Ashley worked in marketing for a tech startup called Innovate Solutions. She lived in a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of Puget Sound, paid for with help from her parents. She came from what she delicately referred to as a business family in Bellevue, the kind of family where success was measured in stock portfolios and country club memberships. "My father owns 3 car dealerships," Ashley explained as I served dessert, a Trace Lakes cake I'd made from scratch. "Monroe Automotive. You might have seen the commercials? Monroe gets you more?" I had seen the commercials, flashy ads with a man in expensive suits promising the best deals in the Pacific Northwest. The kind of businessman who probably made more in a month than I made in a year. "My mother is very involved in charity work," Ashley continued. "She's on the board of the Children's Hospital Foundation and the Seattle Symphony. She organized their gala last year. It raised over $200,000 for pediatric care." "That's wonderful," I said, genuinely meaning it. "Community involvement is so important." "And my younger brother Michael is finishing his MBA at the University of Washington. He's probably going to join Dad's business when he graduates. We're very much a family business kind of family." Ashley turned to me with the kind of polite attention that wealthy people use when they're being gracious to service workers. "So Maria, what do you do for work?" I had been expecting this question, and I had also been curious to see how Ashley would react to my answer. "I clean houses," I said simply, watching her face carefully. I have my own cleaning business, about 20 regular clients in the Bellevue and Kirkland areas. There it was, the pause. Not long enough to be obviously rude, but definitely long enough to process and recalibrate. Ashley's smile became just a little brighter, a little more sympathetic, and I could almost see her mentally filing me under Carlos's sweet but simple mother, who works as a maid. That's really wonderful, she said, her tone taking on the kind of warm encouragement that people use when they're being supportive of someone they see as less fortunate. It must be so nice to be your own boss, and I'm sure your clients just love you. They do, I agreed. Many of them have been with me for over 10 years. Building trust takes time, but it's worth it. What I didn't tell Ashley, because it wasn't her business yet, and because I was curious to see what assumptions she would make, was that my cleaning business was significantly more successful than most people realized. Over the past 15 years, I had built a client base of wealthy professionals who paid premium rates for reliable, trustworthy, discreet service. I had also invested wisely in real estate, starting with a small duplex when Carlos was in middle school and gradually building a portfolio that now included 6 rental properties. I had managed to accumulate a savings account that would surprise most people, including my own son. But Ashley heard I clean houses and made immediate assumptions about my education, my financial situation, my social status, and my place in the hierarchy she was accustomed to navigating. Over the following weeks and months, as Carlos and Ashley's relationship became more serious and she started spending more time at our house, I began to notice a pattern in how she interacted with me. She was always polite, always pleasant, always gracious in the way that well-bred young women are taught to be with older people and service workers. But there was a subtle condescension in her tone, a careful kindness that suggested she saw me as someone to be pitied rather than respected. When they started talking about moving in together in the spring of 2023, Ashley made suggestions about apartments and budgets that were clearly based on Carlos's salary alone, as if my potential contribution to a down payment or emergency fund was either non-existent or irrelevant to their planning. "We're looking at this absolutely adorable place in Capitol Hill," Ashley told me during one of their Sunday dinners at my house. "It's a bit of a stretch financially, but Carlos is so brilliant with technology that I'm sure he'll get promoted soon. And honestly, it's important to live in the right neighborhood when you're building a professional reputation." "That sounds exciting," I said, refilling her wine glass with the good bottle I'd opened in honor of their visit. "If you need help with the security deposit or moving expenses, I'm happy to contribute whatever I can." Ashley's smile became even more gracious and patronizing. "Oh, Maria, that's so incredibly sweet of you to offer, but we absolutely wouldn't want to burden you with our expenses. I know how challenging it must be to make ends meet in your line of work. We're actually very lucky that my parents have offered to help with the security deposit if we need it." She said line of work, the way some people say medical condition, with sympathy, careful delicacy, and just a touch of discomfort at having to acknowledge something slightly unpleasant. I didn't correct her assumptions because I was genuinely curious to see how deep her prejudices ran, and because I believed that Carlos was capable of explaining our family's actual financial situation if he chose to. But Carlos, bless his heart, was so completely in love that he didn't notice the subtle ways Ashley dismissed me and my potential contributions to their life together. He saw her politeness and grace and assumed it meant she liked and respected me. He didn't catch the condescension in her voice when she talked about my work, or the way she automatically assumed I couldn't afford to help with their plans, or the careful way she avoided discussing their future financial goals in front of me, as if I wouldn't understand concepts like mortgages and investment planning. By the summer of 2023, Ashley was dropping increasingly obvious hints about engagement rings and wedding plans. She had started a Pinterest board for their hypothetical wedding that she occasionally showed me, scrolling through photos of venues, dresses, and decorations that cost more than most people's annual salaries. "I know it might seem a little extravagant," she said one afternoon as we sat in my small living room while Carlos was at work, showing me pictures of a lakefront wedding venue that charged $25,000 just for the location rental. "But this is really a once-in-a-lifetime event. My parents always taught me that if you're going to do something important, you should do it right and not cut corners just to save money." "It's a beautiful venue," I said diplomatically, looking at photos of manicured lawns, elegant gazebos, and reception halls that look like something from a fairy tale. "I'm really hoping Carlos proposes soon," Ashley continued, scrolling through photos of wedding dresses that started at $3,000. "I mean, we've been together for over a year now, and we're both at exactly the right stage in our careers. My parents are so excited to help us plan something really special and memorable." Again, I noticed that Ashley's wedding fantasies consistently involved her family's financial contributions and social connections, while I was cast in the role of the grateful mother-in-law who would be honored to attend whatever elaborate celebration they chose to plan and pay for. When Carlos did propose in October 2023, with a ring that probably cost more than Ashley assumed I made in 6 months, she said yes immediately and began planning a wedding that was scheduled for September 2024. The ring itself was beautiful, a 2-carat diamond in a platinum setting that caught the light like a small star. But I found myself wondering whether Ashley loved the ring, the proposal, or the opportunity to plan the kind of wedding she'd been dreaming about. "We want something elegant but not overly formal," Ashley explained to me as she showed me her wedding planning binder during one of their visits. The binder was thick, professionally organized, and filled with vendor information, budget spreadsheets, and timeline charts that looked like they belonged in a business proposal. About 200 guests, probably at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel downtown. My mother knows the event coordinator there, and they can handle everything from catering to florals to photography. "That sounds lovely," I said, flipping through pages of menu options that started at $150 per person. "What can I do to help with the planning?" Ashley's smile was bright and patronizing. "Oh, Maria, you are absolutely so sweet to offer, and I really appreciate your willingness to be involved. I think we have most of the major things covered through my family's connections, but maybe you could help with some of the smaller details, like addressing invitations or helping to put together centerpieces. I know how much you enjoy crafting." She was offering me the role of wedding assistant, not wedding host. It was clear that she saw me as someone who would be grateful to be included in the planning process, rather than someone who might have opinions, preferences, resources, or traditions that should be considered when planning my son's wedding. The guest list, as Ashley described it, consisted primarily of her family, her parents' business associates, their college friends, and a few of Carlos's co-workers. When I asked about including longtime family friends like the Hernandezes, who had known Carlos since he was 5 years old, or the Rodriguezes, who had helped me through some very difficult times when Carlos was growing up, Ashley looked uncomfortable. "Well, we definitely want to keep the celebration kind of intimate and cohesive," she said carefully. "You know, people who really understand our lifestyle and our goals for the future. Sometimes mixing very different social groups can create awkward dynamics at formal events." I understood exactly what she meant. She was worried that my working-class friends, my neighbors, the people from our community who had helped raise Carlos and celebrate his achievements, would somehow embarrass her in front of her parents' country club associates and her college sorority sisters. I decided to let her continue with her assumptions and her planning while I quietly prepared for the conversation we would eventually need to have about finances, family contributions, and exactly who would be paying for this elaborate celebration she was organizing. But in January 2024, Ashley and Carlos shared news that accelerated all their timelines and brought everything to a head much sooner than I had expected. Ashley was pregnant. "We're so incredibly excited," Carlos told me when they came to dinner to share the announcement, both of them glowing with happiness and anticipation. "The baby is due in September, right around our original wedding date. So we've decided to move the wedding up to June," Ashley added, her hand resting protectively on her still flat stomach. "That way I won't be uncomfortable in my dress, and we'll have time to get settled as a married couple before the baby arrives. It's going to be such a wonderful year for our family." "Congratulations," I said, genuinely happy for them despite my growing concerns about Ashley's attitude toward me and our family. "This is wonderful news. A baby is such a blessing." "Thank you so much," Ashley said, leaning into Carlos's embrace. "We're going to need all the help and support we can get. Being new parents is going to be such a learning experience, and we're so grateful to have family who can guide us through it." Over the following weeks, Ashley's pregnancy seemed to amplify all her existing tendencies toward elaborate planning and social positioning. She began organizing not just a wedding but a whole series of pre-baby events designed to showcase their growing family to her social circle and establish her status as someone who knew how to celebrate life's milestones with style and elegance. "We're planning an engagement party for March," she announced during one of their Sunday visits. "Just something small and intimate at my parents' country club. Maybe 75 people, close friends and family, plus some of Dad's business associates who've known me since I was little." "That sounds nice," I said. "What kind of guest list are you putting together?" "Oh, mostly our friend group from college and my family social circle. People who've been part of my life forever and are excited to meet Carlos and welcome him into our community." I noticed immediately that Ashley's description of the guest list didn't include my friends. My family, anyone from Carlos's childhood, or the people from our neighborhood and community who had been part of his life long before Ashley entered it. "Will you be inviting any of Carlos's longtime friends?" I asked carefully. "The Hernandezes have known him since elementary school, and Mrs. Rodriguez was like a second mother to him when he was growing up." Ashley shifted uncomfortably in her chair. "Well, we really want to keep it kind of refined and cohesive. You know, people who understand each other's backgrounds and will feel comfortable in that kind of setting. Sometimes mixing very different social circles can be challenging for everyone involved." Carlos, who had been quiet during this exchange, finally spoke up. "Ashley, the Hernandezes and the Rodriguezes are like family to us. They've been part of every major celebration in my life. They should definitely be included." Of course," Ashley said quickly, her tone suggesting that she was agreeing to something she didn't really want to do. "I just meant that we want to make sure everyone feels comfortable and included. You know how awkward it can be when people don't have much in common." The engagement party in March was exactly what I had expected, a beautiful, expensive event held in the elegant ballroom of the Bellevue Country Club, with crystal chandeliers, professionally arranged flowers, and a level of formal service that spoke of serious money and social position. I wore my best dress, a simple black cocktail dress that I'd bought for my high school reunion, and tried to blend in among Ashley's friends and family. Throughout the evening, I was introduced to Ashley's social circle as Carlos's mother, without any additional context about who I was, what I did, or what role I played in Carlos's life beyond biological parenthood. I spent the evening smiling politely while Ashley's friends made small talk with me about how proud I must be of Carlos's success, how lucky I was that he'd found someone like Ashley, and how wonderful it must be to see him settling down with such a lovely girl from such a stable background. "You must be so grateful that Ashley comes from such an established family," one of Patricia Monroe's friends said to me during cocktail hour, her voice carrying the kind of sympathetic warmth that wealthy people use when they're being gracious to those less fortunate. "It's so important for young men to marry into stability, don't you think?" especially when they're trying to build professional careers. I smiled and nodded while privately wondering what this woman would say if she knew that I owned more real estate than most of the people at this party, and that my unstable background had produced a son who was more financially responsible and professionally successful than half of their children. But the real revelation of Ashley's true attitude toward me came at the baby shower in May 2024, 3 months before their hastily rescheduled wedding. Ashley had planned what she called an intimate celebration at her parents' house, a sprawling colonial mansion in Bellevue with professionally landscaped gardens, a 3-car garage, and the kind of understated elegance that speaks of generational wealth. The backyard had been transformed into something that looked like it belonged in a magazine spread about perfect entertaining, with pink and gold balloons arranged in elegant clusters. Flower arrangements that probably cost more than most people spend on groceries in a month, and a dessert table that looked like it had been designed by a professional event planner. The guest list was about 40 women, Ashley's friends from college and her current job, her mother's social circle from the country club and charity boards, a few relatives who had flown in from California and Oregon, and me. I was invited, of course, because excluding the grandmother-to-be would have been too obviously rude, but it was clear from the moment I arrived that I was expected to play a supporting role rather than being honored as a central figure in this celebration. "Maria, how lovely that you could make it," Ashley's mother, Patricia Monroe, said when I arrived carrying a carefully wrapped gift bag. Patricia was an elegant woman in her early 50s, with the kind of polished appearance that speaks of regular salon appointments, personal shopping services, and a lifestyle built around leisure and social obligations. "Ashley mentioned that you'd offered to help with cleanup afterward, which is so thoughtful of you." This was news to me. Ashley had never asked me to help with cleanup, but apparently Patricia had simply assumed that the cleaning lady would naturally handle the post-party mess, regardless of the fact that I was there as a guest to celebrate my future grandchild. "Actually," I said politely, "I'm here as a guest to celebrate Ashley and Carlos's baby." Patricia looked confused for a moment, as if the concept of a cleaning woman being a guest rather than hired help required some mental adjustment. Then she laughed, a bright social laugh that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Of course, how silly of me. I suppose I just assumed. Well, never mind. Let me introduce you to some of the other ladies. I'm sure they'd love to meet Carlos's mother." I spent the next hour being introduced to Ashley's friends and relatives as various versions of the grandmother-to-be, or Carlos's mother, but never with any context about who I was as an individual, what I had accomplished in my life, or what role I had played in raising the successful young man they were all praising. The baby shower games were elaborate and expensive, guessing baby food flavors using gourmet organic options that cost more per jar than most people spend on an entire meal. A onesie decorating station equipped with fabric markers, rhinestones, and professional quality supplies, and a diaper cake centerpiece that was more artwork than practical gift. Everything was beautiful, everything was perfect, and everything was designed to showcase Ashley's taste and her family's ability to celebrate in style. I participated politely, won a couple of games through what Ashley's friends called beginner's luck, and tried to enjoy celebrating my future grandchild despite feeling increasingly like an outsider at what should have been a family celebration. The gifts were opened with elaborate ceremony, each present carefully photographed for Ashley's social media accounts. Designer baby clothes, expensive nursery equipment, professional photography sessions, and gift certificates to boutiques that specialized in luxury infant items. When Ashley opened my gift, a beautiful hand-carved wooden rocking chair that I'd commissioned from a local artisan who specialized in heirloom-quality children's furniture, she held it up and smiled for the camera like she had with every other present. "This is so sweet and thoughtful," she said, reading the card I'd written by hand. "Thank you so much, Maria." One of her friends, a perfectly groomed blonde named Rebecca, who worked in pharmaceutical sales and drove a BMW that was newer than most people's apartments, leaned over to look at the gift tag more closely. "Oh, that's from the Maid," Rebecca said loudly enough for several people in the immediate area to hear clearly. How thoughtful of her to contribute something homemade. The words hit me like a physical blow. Not just the dismissive term, the maid, but the assumption that my carefully chosen, professionally crafted gift was somehow homemade in a way that made it less valuable than the expensive store-bought items that had been opened before it. Ashley didn't correct her. Instead, Ashley laughed, a bright social laugh that matched her mother's, and said, "Yes, Maria is just wonderful. She's been such a help with everything. I honestly don't know what we'd do without her. She's always so willing to pitch in wherever she's needed." The conversation moved on to the next gift, but I sat there in my folding chair. Everyone else was sitting in proper patio furniture, processing what had just happened. Ashley had not only allowed her friend to refer to me as the maid, but had responded in a way that reinforced that perception and reduced me to someone whose value lay in my willingness to be useful and helpful. I wasn't Carlos's mother, the grandmother-to-be, an honored guest at this celebration, or a woman with her own accomplishments and identity. I was the help. I was someone to be grateful for, someone who knew her place, someone who could be counted on to contribute what was expected and not ask for more than she deserved. That's when I made a decision that would change everything for all of us. I excused myself from the party, telling Ashley I needed to get something from my car. I walked out to the circular driveway where my modest Honda Accord sat among the BMWs, Mercedes, and Range Rovers that belonged to the other guests, and I retrieved an envelope from my glove compartment, an envelope that I had been planning to give to Carlos and Ashley as a wedding gift in June, but which suddenly seemed much more appropriate for this moment. When I returned to the party, Ashley was finishing the gift opening ceremony and her friends were gathering around the elaborate dessert table to admire the professionally decorated cake and sample the gourmet cupcakes that had been ordered from the most expensive bakery in Bellevue. I approached Ashley with the envelope, my voice calm but loud enough for the nearby guests to hear clearly. "Ashley," I said, "I have one more gift for you and Carlos." "Oh my goodness, how sweet," Ashley said, taking the envelope with the kind of gracious enthusiasm she'd been displaying all afternoon. "Maria, you really didn't need to bring anything else. What is it? Why don't you open it and find out?" Ashley opened the envelope and pulled out the contents, a letter that I had written several months earlier, along with several official-looking legal documents. She started reading, and I watched her face change from polite curiosity to confusion to complete shock as she processed what she was seeing. What is this?" she asked, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper. "It's information about your baby's inheritance," I said clearly, my voice carrying across the now quiet patio as conversation stopped and attention focused on our exchange. "Since you're about to become part of our family, I thought you should know about the trust fund that Carlos will inherit when he turns 30 next year." The nearby guests had started paying attention to our conversation, sensing that something interesting and potentially dramatic was happening. I could see heads turning, conversations pausing, and that particular kind of focused attention that wealthy people give to situations involving money. Ashley was staring at the documents with growing amazement. This says that Carlos is inheriting $2 million? "That's correct," I said calmly. "Along with 6 rental properties and a controlling share in my cleaning business, which grosses approximately $400,000 annually." The silence around us was now complete. Everyone within earshot had stopped talking entirely and was listening to our conversation with the kind of rapt attention usually reserved for television dramas. Ashley looked up at me with an expression of total bewilderment. I don't understand. You're a maid. You clean houses for a living. I own a cleaning business, I corrected, my voice steady and clear. I also own 6 rental properties throughout King County, have invested in several successful local businesses, and have been building Carlos's trust fund since he was born. The house we're standing in? I could buy it tomorrow with cash and still have money left over for a nice vacation. Rebecca, who had called me the maid 20 minutes earlier, was staring at me with her mouth literally hanging open. Several other guests had moved closer, clearly not wanting to miss any part of this unexpected revelation. But you clean houses, Ashley repeated weakly, as if saying it again would somehow make my financial situation make sense within her understanding of how the world was supposed to work. Yes, I do clean houses, I agreed. I also employ 15 other people who clean houses. I started with one client 25 years ago when Carlos was 3 years old, and I built it into a business that generates more income than most college graduates make in their first decade of professional work. I've been investing the profits in real estate and other opportunities for over 20 years. I looked around at the group of women who had been treating me like hired help for the past 2 hours. Women who had made assumptions about my education, my intelligence, and my social value based entirely on my profession. The funny thing about cleaning houses for wealthy people, I continued, is that you learn an enormous amount about money management, investment opportunities, tax strategies, and how to spot the difference between people who have real money and people who just spend a lot of money trying to look like they have money. Ashley was looking through the legal documents with shaking hands, her perfectly manicured nails trembling as she tried to process the scope of what she was seeing. Carlos never told me about any of this. Carlos doesn't know yet, I said. I was planning to tell him about his inheritance on his wedding day as a surprise. But since you seem so concerned with financial planning and building wealth through family connections, I thought you should know what you're actually marrying into. One of Ashley's relatives, an older woman who had been introduced to me as her great-aunt from Portland, had joined our group and was reading over Ashley's shoulder. Maria, are these documents legitimate? Completely legitimate. You're welcome to call my attorney if you'd like verification. His contact information is in the envelope, along with copies of the property deeds and business incorporation papers. I smiled at the group of women who had spent the afternoon treating me like someone who was lucky to be included in their elegant celebration. Someone whose homemade gift was a charming but ultimately insignificant contribution to their sophisticated gathering. Now, Ashley, I believe you have some thank you notes to write. And I have several clients to visit this evening. My weekend cleaning clients always pay extra for same-day service, and that extra money adds up over time when you're building an investment portfolio. As I turned to walk toward the exit, I heard Ashley call after me, her voice high and strained. Maria, wait, please wait. I don't understand why you didn't tell us about this before. I turned back to face her, and my voice was calm but firm, carrying clearly across the patio where 40 women were hanging on every word. Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought I had nothing to offer your family but cheap labor and maternal gratitude. I wanted to see how you'd treat the grandmother of your child when you believed she was just the help who should be grateful for whatever scraps of inclusion you threw her way. The entire party was listening now, and I could see Ashley's face turning red with embarrassment, anger, and what might have been the beginning of genuine shame. You passed that test beautifully, I continued. You allowed your friend to call me the maid without correction. You treated my carefully chosen gift as something homemade and less valuable than your expensive store-bought presents. You've spent 2 years planning a future with my son while treating his mother like someone whose only value was her willingness to be useful and stay in her place. I paused, looking around at all the shocked faces staring at me. Now you know exactly how much respect you've shown to the woman who will be controlling your child's financial future. I walked to my modest car, leaving Ashley to explain to 40 wealthy women how she had just spent the past 2 hours treating a multimillionaire like hired help, and how the grandmother of her unborn child had more money than most of them would ever see. As I drove home through the tree-lined streets of Bellevue, passing the enormous houses where some of my clients lived, I reflected on what I had just done and prepared for the conversation I knew would be coming from Carlos within the hour. I had revealed information that I had been planning to share privately with my son, and I had done it in the most public and dramatic way possible. But watching Ashley allow her friend to dismiss me as the maid had triggered something protective and fierce that I couldn't control or ignore. For 2 years, I had watched this woman plan a future with my son while treating me like I was lucky to be included in their lives. I had listened to her make assumptions about my financial limitations while planning expensive celebrations funded entirely by her family's money. I had been introduced to her friends as someone whose only identity was Carlos's mother, as if I had no accomplishments, no intelligence, no value beyond having given birth to a successful young man. The envelope I had given Ashley contained documents that I had been carefully preparing for months, legal papers outlining the trust fund I had established for Carlos, property deeds showing the real estate investments I had made in his name over the years, business and corporation papers demonstrating the scope and profitability of my cleaning service, and a detailed letter explaining my plans for transferring business ownership to him when he turned 30. I had originally intended to present these documents to Carlos and Ashley together on their wedding day, as both a gift and an explanation of the financial responsibilities that would come with Carlos's inheritance. But Ashley's behavior at the baby shower, her casual acceptance of being called the maid, her treatment of my gift as somehow inferior, her obvious comfort with treating me like hired help, had convinced me that she needed to understand our family's actual financial situation before she made any more assumptions about her role in our lives. When I got home to my small but well-maintained house, a house that I owned free and clear, in a neighborhood where property values had tripled since I'd bought it 15 years earlier, I sat in my kitchen with a cup of coffee and waited for my phone to ring. It rang 12 minutes later. Chapter 2. The Reckoning Begins. Mom, what the hell happened at Ashley's baby shower? Carlos's voice was confused, upset, and slightly panicked. Ashley just called me crying hysterically, saying something about trust funds and rental properties and everyone at the party staring at her. She said you embarrassed her in front of all her friends and family. I gave her information about your inheritance, I said calmly, taking a sip of my coffee and settling back in my kitchen chair. Information that I've been planning to share with both of you for months. What inheritance? Mom, what are you talking about? I don't have an inheritance. I realized that in my anger at Ashley's treatment of me, I had revealed information to her that I hadn't yet shared with my own son. For 2 years, I had been building his financial future while he remained completely unaware of what I was creating for him. Carlos, I think you should come over here right now. This is definitely a conversation we need to have in person, and it's going to take some time to explain everything properly. I'm on my way. But Mom, Ashley is really upset. She said you made her look stupid in front of her whole family. We'll talk about Ashley's feelings when you get here. Right now, we need to talk about your future. Carlos arrived at my house 35 minutes later, still wearing the casual weekend clothes he'd been working in when Ashley called him. He looked confused, worried, and more than a little angry. I could see that he was struggling to reconcile his image of me as his supportive, hard-working mother with whatever Ashley had told him about trust funds and business ownership. Mom, start from the beginning, he said as we sat down in my small living room. What is this about an inheritance? And why did Ashley find out about it at her baby shower instead of hearing about it from me? I led him to my home office, a converted bedroom that I'd set up with a desk, filing cabinets, and a computer where I managed both my cleaning business and my investment portfolio. I pulled out a copy of the same documents I had given Ashley, along with several additional files that contained the full scope of what I had built over the past 25 years. Carlos, when you were born, I made a decision that your life was going to be different from mine. I was 22 years old, working 3 part-time jobs to afford our little apartment, and I knew that if I wanted you to have opportunities and security, I was going to have to create them myself. Carlos looked at the documents spread across my desk with the same shocked expression Ashley had worn. $2 million? Mom, how is this even possible? You've been cleaning houses my whole life. I've been building a business your whole life, I corrected gently. Carlos, do you remember when you were 8 years old and I started working fewer evening shifts but more weekend hours? Yeah, you said you were getting better clients. I was getting better clients, wealthier clients, clients who paid premium rates for reliable, trustworthy service. Instead of cleaning 4 houses for $40 each, I started cleaning 2 houses for $150 each. The work was more detailed, more demanding, but the hourly rate was significantly better. I showed him the business financial statements that I had meticulously maintained for over 2 decades. Carlos, my cleaning business currently grosses about $400,000 annually. After expenses, employee salaries, insurance, and equipment costs, I clear approximately $220,000 in profit each year. $220,000? Carlos sat down heavily in my desk chair, staring at numbers that completely contradicted everything he thought he knew about our financial situation. Mom, that's more than I make as a senior software engineer. I also own 6 rental properties, I continued, pulling out property deeds and rental agreements. The first duplex I bought when you were 9 years old, using the profits from my first 2 years of premium cleaning contracts as a down payment. The second property I purchased when you were 12, then another when you were 15, and so on. Each property pays for itself through rental income, plus generates about $3,000 to $5,000 in monthly profit. Carlos was reading through the property deeds with growing amazement, recognizing some of the addresses as being in expensive neighborhoods he'd always assumed were far beyond our reach. These houses, Mom, I know these areas. These are million-dollar properties. Real estate in Seattle has been very good to us over the past 15 years, I said. But Carlos, the most important thing you need to understand is that I've been doing all of this for you. Every investment decision, every business expansion, every financial choice has been designed to give you security and opportunities that I never had. Why didn't you tell me? Why did I have to find out about this from Ashley after she found out at a baby shower? I sat down across from him and chose my words carefully, because this was the conversation that would determine everything about our relationship going forward. Because I wanted to see what kind of woman you were choosing to spend your life with, and I wanted to understand how she would treat your family when she thought we had nothing to offer her except love and support. What do you mean? Carlos, for 2 years, Ashley has treated me like I'm lucky to be included in your lives. She's made assumptions about my financial limitations. She's planned your future based entirely on her family's money and connections. And today, she allowed her friend to refer to me as the maid without bothering to correct her. Carlos looked uncomfortable, shifting in his chair. Mom, Ashley doesn't mean anything by the way she talks. She's used to a certain lifestyle. She grew up differently than we did. And what lifestyle is that? One where working people are automatically assumed to be inferior? One where someone who cleans houses must be poor, uneducated, and grateful for whatever scraps of respect they receive? That's not fair. Ashley has always been polite to you. Polite, yes. Respectful, no. There's a significant difference, Carlos, and the fact that you don't see that difference is part of the problem. I pulled out my phone and showed him screenshots of Ashley's Pinterest wedding board that I had taken over the past several months. Your fiancée has been planning a $45,000 wedding funded entirely by her parents because she automatically assumed that your family couldn't contribute anything meaningful to the celebration. She's been making major life decisions based on the assumption that I'm a financial liability rather than a financial asset. Carlos scrolled through the wedding plans, his expression growing more troubled as he saw the scope and expense of what Ashley had been organizing without any input from our family. She never asked me about what you might want to contribute to the wedding, because she never considered the possibility that I might have anything significant to contribute. She heard, "I clean houses," and immediately decided that meant I was poor and would need her family's charity to afford even basic participation in your wedding. Mom, that's not necessarily. Most people who work in cleaning services don't have the kind of money you're talking about. Don't what? Don't have business sense? Don't understand investment opportunities? Don't know how to build wealth? Don't deserve to be treated with respect regardless of their bank account balance? Carlos was quiet for a moment, clearly struggling with the implications of what I was saying. I didn't mean it that way. Carlos, your fiancée has spent 2 years planning a life with you that completely excluded your family's financial resources and contributions because she made assumptions about my worth based on my profession. That tells me something very important about her values and her character. What does it tell you? It tells me that she values image over substance. It tells me that she judges people based on their job titles rather than their accomplishments or their character. And it tells me that she sees marriage as an opportunity to access her family's money and social status rather than an opportunity to build something together with you. Carlos was reading through the trust fund documents again, studying the legal language and the financial projections. Mom, when were you planning to tell me about all of this? On your wedding day. I was going to present these documents to both of you as a wedding gift and an explanation of the responsibilities that come with significant financial resources. And now? Now Ashley knows about your inheritance before you do, and she's probably calculating how much more elaborate your wedding can be now that she knows there's substantial family money available to fund her social aspirations. As if summoned by my words, Carlos's phone started ringing insistently. Ashley's name appeared on the screen, along with a photo of her laughing at some restaurant where they'd had dinner. Should I answer it? Carlos asked, looking at the phone like it might explode. That's entirely up to you. But before you do, I want you to think about something very carefully. What? Ashley just found out that her fiancé is inheriting significant wealth, and her first reaction was to call you upset about being embarrassed at her baby shower. She's not excited about your financial security. She's not happy that you'll have resources to provide for your family. She's not curious about how I built this wealth or what it means for your future together. She's angry that she didn't know about it sooner and upset that she looked foolish in front of her friends. Carlos's phone stopped ringing, then immediately started again. That should tell you something very important about her priorities, I continued. Carlos declined the call and set his phone face down on my desk. Mom, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Of course. Do you think Ashley loves me? Or do you think she loves what she thinks I can provide for her? The question broke my heart because I could see in his eyes that he was starting to doubt something he had never questioned before. Something fundamental about his relationship and his understanding of why Ashley wanted to marry him. Carlos, I think Ashley loves the version of you that fits into her plans for her life. I think she loves your education, your career prospects, your stability, your willingness to let her family take the lead in financial planning, and your potential as a father for children she wants to raise in the lifestyle she's accustomed to. But do you think she loves me? Me as a person, separate from all of that? I think she loves you as much as someone can love another person when they're primarily focused on what that person can do for them rather than who that person actually is. Carlos was quiet for several minutes, reading through all the documents I had shown him and thinking about everything I had told him about Ashley's behavior over the past 2 years. The rental properties, he said finally. When did you buy the first one? When you were 9 years old. I used the profits from my cleaning business as a down payment on a small duplex in Ballard. I lived in one unit and rented out the other, using the rental income to pay the mortgage. Why didn't I know about any of this? Because I wanted you to develop your own work ethic and your own sense of accomplishment. I wanted you to succeed based on your own efforts and abilities, not because you knew you had a trust fund waiting for you. And the business? How long have you been employing other people? 15 years. I started with just me and one part-time helper when you were in middle school. Now I have 15 employees and we service some of the wealthiest neighborhoods in King County. We're booked solid 6 months in advance. Carlos looked at me with an expression I had never seen before, a mixture of respect, amazement, and something that might have been pride mixed with shame. Mom, you're not just a cleaning lady. You're a businesswoman. You're an entrepreneur. You've built something significant and successful. I've built something for you, I corrected. Everything I've done has been about giving you opportunities, security, and choices that I never had. But Ashley doesn't see it that way. Ashley sees me as someone who should be grateful for whatever place she assigns me in your lives. Someone who should be thankful to be included in your plans, rather than someone who should be consulted about those plans. Carlos's phone rang again. This time, he answered it. Ashley, I can't talk about this right now. I'm with my mom learning about family finances that I should have known about years ago. What do you mean? How much is the business worth? No, we're absolutely not going to discuss changing the wedding budget tonight. Because I'm trying to understand why my fiancé allowed her friend to call my mother the maid without correcting her immediately. I could hear Ashley's voice through the phone, high-pitched and defensive, but I couldn't make out her specific words. Ashley, I'll call you tomorrow. I need time to process everything I've learned today. No, I'm not angry at you for not knowing about the money. I'm angry about how you've been treating my mother for 2 years while you didn't know about the money. We'll talk tomorrow. Carlos hung up and looked at me with tired, disappointed eyes. She wants to know if we can afford a bigger wedding now that she knows about the trust fund. And what do you want to know? I want to know how I fell in love with someone who just found out that my family has significant money and immediately started planning how to spend it instead of asking how my mother built it or what it means for our families. Future. We sat in my office for another 2 hours while I showed Carlos the details of everything I had built for him over the past 25 years, the investment accounts, the business financial records, the property management reports, the legal documents that would transfer it all to him on his 30th birthday in 8 months. Mom, this is overwhelming. I don't know anything about managing rental properties or running a business with 15 employees. You'll learn, and you don't have to do any of it alone. I'm not planning to retire anytime soon, and I'll teach you everything you need to know. What about Ashley? What about the baby? How does this change things with them? What about them? How does this change our relationship? How does this change our family dynamics? I chose my words very carefully, because I knew that what I said next would influence Carlos's decision about his future. Carlos, your inheritance doesn't change who Ashley is or how she's treated your family for the past 2 years. It just gives you more information about her character, her values, and her priorities. Now you know how she behaves when she thinks your family has nothing to offer, and you'll be able to see how she behaves when she knows your family has significant resources. She's carrying my child. Yes, she is. And that child will be my grandchild. And I will love that baby regardless of how I feel about Ashley's behavior toward me. But you need to decide what kind of life you want to build and what kind of partner you want to build it with. You need to think about whether you want to be married to someone who sees your family's resources as an extension of her own financial planning, or someone who understands that wealth comes with responsibilities as well as opportunities. Carlos was quiet for a long time, staring at the document spread across my desk. Finally, he said, "I need to think about all of this. I need to figure out what this means for my relationship with Ashley." Take all the time you need. But Carlos, remember that the woman you marry will be your partner in managing everything I've built for you. She'll have access to your financial decisions, your business interests, and your inheritance planning. Make sure it's someone who shares your values about money, family, and responsibility. And if Ashley doesn't share those values, then you'll have to decide whether you want to spend your life with someone who sees your family's success as her personal opportunity rather than as a responsibility to be shared and preserved for future generations. After Carlos left that evening, I sat in my home office looking at the photographs on my desk, pictures of him at various stages of his life, graduating from high school, starting college, getting his first job, buying his first car. In every photo, he looked determined, hard-working, and proud of his accomplishments. I had spent 25 years building financial security for him, and in one afternoon at a baby shower, I had been forced to reveal it all because his fiancée couldn't treat me with basic human respect. But maybe that revelation had been necessary. Maybe Carlos needed to see Ashley's reaction to learning about his inheritance. Maybe he needed to understand that the woman he was planning to marry had been making assumptions about his family's worth based on class prejudices and social snobbery rather than getting to know us as individuals. My phone rang at 9:30 p.m. It was Carlos. "Mom, I've been thinking about everything you told me today and everything that happened at Ashley's baby shower. And I think I need to have a very serious conversation with Ashley about respect, family values, and what she actually wants from our relationship." "That sounds like a wise idea. I also want to apologize to you." "For what?" "For not noticing how Ashley was treating you for the past 2 years. For not standing up for you when she made assumptions about your financial situation. For not including you in our planning as an equal partner instead of letting her treat you like someone who should be grateful for whatever role she assigned you." "Carlos, you don't need to apologize for being in love. But I do need to apologize for being blind to disrespect toward my mother. And I need to figure out whether I'm engaged to someone who loves me for who I am, or someone who loves the lifestyle she thinks I can provide for her." "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to ask Ashley some very direct questions about her expectations, her assumptions, and her plans for our marriage. And depending on her answers, I'm going to decide whether this relationship is what I thought it was." "And the baby?" "The baby doesn't change the fact that I need to be married to someone who treats my family with respect and understands the difference between building wealth and spending wealth. If anything, the baby makes it more important that I choose the right partner." After we hung up, I realized that revealing Carlos's inheritance at Ashley's baby shower had accomplished something I hadn't intended. It had forced my son to see his fiancée clearly for the first time in their relationship. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to create a situation where they have to confront the truth about the people they've chosen to trust with their heart and their future. Chapter 3. The Uncomfortable Truth. The next 4 days were among the longest of my life. I didn't hear from Carlos, didn't receive any update on his conversation with Ashley, and had no idea whether my revelation at the baby shower had helped him see his relationship clearly or had simply created more problems for everyone involved. On Thursday evening, exactly 1 week after the baby shower incident, my doorbell rang at 6:30 p.m. I opened it to find Ashley standing on my porch, alone, looking like she hadn't slept properly in days. She was dressed more casually than I had ever seen her. Dark jeans, a simple sweater, and minimal makeup. Without her usual polished presentation, she looked younger, more vulnerable, and genuinely distressed rather than just socially embarrassed. "Maria, may I please come in? I really need to talk to you." I stepped aside to let her enter, noting that she was moving more slowly than usual. The pregnancy was starting to show, and she looked exhausted in a way that went beyond physical discomfort. "Would you like some coffee? Or tea might be better for the baby." "Tea would be wonderful. Thank you." I made tea for both of us, giving Ashley time to gather her thoughts and giving myself time to prepare for whatever conversation was about to happen. When I returned to the living room with our cups, Ashley was sitting on my sofa staring at her hands. "Maria," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "I owe you an enormous apology." "For what, specifically?" "For everything. For treating you like you were beneath me for the past 2 years. For making assumptions about your financial situation without bothering to get to know you as a person. For planning a future with Carlos that didn't include respect for his family or acknowledgement of your contributions to his life." Ashley's voice was getting stronger as she continued, but I could see that she had been crying recently. "And most of all, for allowing Rebecca to call you the maid at my baby shower and not correcting her immediately. For treating your beautiful, thoughtful gift like it was somehow less valuable than the expensive things my friends brought. For making you feel unwelcome at a celebration that should have honored you as the grandmother of my child. Why didn't you correct Rebecca when she called me the maid?" Ashley was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with her answer. "Because part of me agreed with her. Part of me thought that's what you were, someone who cleaned houses and should be grateful to be included in our lives and our celebrations." At least she was being honest, which was more than I had expected. "Ashley, what did Carlos say when you talked to him about all of this?" Ashley set down her teacup with shaking hands. "He asked me questions that I've never been asked before. Hard questions about what I want from our relationship and why I want it." "Such as?" "He asked me if I loved him for who he is, or if I loved what I thought he could provide for me. He asked me why I had never inquired about your potential contributions to our wedding or our future. He asked me why I had been planning our entire life based on my family's money and connections, while treating his family like they had nothing meaningful to offer." Ashley looked directly at me for the first time since she'd arrived. "He also asked me something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about." "What was that?" "He asked me how I would feel if someone treated our daughter the way I've been treating you." The question hung in the air between us. Ashley was carrying a baby girl, and Carlos had forced her to imagine that child grown up and facing the kind of casual disrespect and class-based prejudice that Ashley had been showing me. "How did you answer him?" I couldn't answer him honestly at first, but when I really thought about it, the truth is that if someone treated our daughter the way I've treated you, I would be absolutely furious. I would think that person was classist and ignorant and completely wrong about my child's worth and value. Ashley wiped her eyes with a tissue she'd been holding. "But that's exactly how I've been treating you, isn't it?" "Yes, it is. Maria, I need you to understand something about my background, not as an excuse but as an explanation. I didn't grow up around people who worked with their hands or ran service businesses. In my family, success was measured by college degrees and corporate positions and country club memberships. My parents' friends were all doctors, lawyers, business executives, People who made their money in offices and boardrooms. And you thought that made you better than people who work differently? I thought it made me different. I thought it meant I understood things about money and status and social positioning that other people didn't understand. Ashley looked around my living room, really seeing it for the first time instead of just cataloging its differences from the homes she was accustomed to. But you understand things about money that I've never learned, don't you? Such as how to build wealth instead of just spending it. How to invest in things that appreciate in value instead of things that impress people. How to create real financial security instead of just financial comfort that depends on other people's continued success. I was genuinely surprised by her insight. What makes you say that? Because I spent 2 years watching you live modestly while building a business and investment portfolio worth millions of dollars. Meanwhile, I've been spending money I don't actually have on a wedding. I can't really afford to impress people who probably don't care as much as I think they do. Ashley pulled out her phone and showed me her wedding planning spreadsheet, the same elaborate document she'd shown me months earlier. Maria, I've been planning a $45,000 wedding funded by my parents' credit lines and family loans. You could pay for this entire wedding with cash from your checking account and not even notice the expense. Money isn't the most important point here, Ashley. Then what is the most important point? The point is respect. The point is treating people based on their character and their contributions rather than their bank accounts or their job titles. The point is recognizing that a person's worth and a person's wealth aren't the same thing. Ashley was quiet for several minutes, thinking about what I had said and clearly trying to process not just my words but the fundamental shift in her understanding of our family dynamics. Maria, can I ask you something very personal? Go ahead. Why didn't you tell Carlos about his inheritance sooner? Why did you let me make assumptions about your financial situation for 2 entire years? Because I wanted to see who you really were when you thought my family had nothing to offer but love and emotional support. I wanted to understand your values and your character before you knew there was significant money involved. And what did you learn about me? I chose my words carefully, because I could see that Ashley was genuinely trying to understand her own behavior and its impact on our family. I learned that you're someone who makes assumptions about people based on their professions rather than their accomplishments. I learned that you plan your future based on other people's money rather than your own efforts and contributions. I learned that you're capable of treating the grandmother of your child like hired help when you think she has no power to affect your life. Ashley flinched at my assessment, but she didn't argue with it or try to minimize it. I also learned, I continued, that you're intelligent enough to recognize your mistakes when they're pointed out to you, and mature enough to acknowledge them rather than making excuses. That's why we're having this conversation instead of me simply writing you off as someone who doesn't deserve to be part of my family. Do you think Carlos is going to break up with me? I don't know. That depends on how you answer the questions he's asking you, and whether you're capable of demonstrating real change rather than just apologizing for your past behavior. What questions? Questions about what kind of marriage you want to have. Questions about how you plan to treat his family going forward. Questions about whether you're capable of building something together with him rather than just spending his inheritance on your social aspirations. Ashley was crying again, but this time it seemed to be genuine emotion rather than social embarrassment. Maria, I do love Carlos. I really truly love him. But I'm terrified that I've ruined everything by being so shallow and prejudiced and awful to you. Have you? I don't know. How do I prove to him that I love him for who he is and not for what his family can provide? How do I show him that I can change and become someone worthy of marrying him? That's not something you can prove with words, Ashley. That's something you have to demonstrate through your actions over time, and through the choices you make about your priorities going forward. What kind of actions? I leaned forward, looking directly at her. Start by canceling the $45,000 wedding. What? Cancel the elaborate celebration funded by your parents' money and plan something that reflects your actual values and financial situation as a couple. Show Carlos that you want to build a life with him based on what you can create together, not on what his inheritance can buy you. Ashley looked shocked. But we've already put deposits down on vendors. We've sent save the date cards to 200 people. Everyone is expecting this huge celebration. My parents have already committed to paying for most of it. People are expecting a party. Give them a marriage instead. I don't understand. Ashley, what matters more to you? Having a wedding that looks impressive on social media and makes you feel like a princess for one day? Or starting a marriage based on financial honesty and shared values that will last for the rest of your life? She was quiet for a long moment, staring at her phone with its elaborate planning spreadsheets and vendor contact lists. The marriage matters more. Then prove it. Plan a wedding you can afford with your own money, without loans from your parents or expectations of funding from Carlos's inheritance. Invite people who care about your happiness rather than people you want to impress. Focus on the commitment you're making rather than the event you're hosting. What if Carlos's inheritance could easily pay for the bigger wedding? It could, but should it? Is that how you want to start your marriage? By spending money that isn't yours on a party that doesn't reflect who you are as a couple or what you've accomplished together? Ashley was staring at her wedding planning materials, looking at months of work and thousands of dollars in deposits. Maria, can I ask you something else? Yes. If I do this, if I cancel the expensive wedding and plan something simpler and more authentic, will you help me? Will you be involved in planning our celebration as Carlos's mother rather than just as a guest who should be grateful to be included? Why would you want my help? Because you understand things I don't understand. You know how to build something meaningful instead of just something impressive. You know the difference between spending money and investing money. And because... She paused, struggling with her words. Because I want to learn how to be the kind of woman who deserves to marry your son. I was surprised by her honesty and her apparent willingness to make significant changes to how she approached our relationship and her future with Carlos. Ashley, if you're serious about wanting to build a different kind of relationship with Carlos and with me, then yes, I'll help you. But you need to understand that help comes with expectations. What expectations? I expect you to treat me with the respect you would show any other family member who is contributing to your celebration and your future. I expect you to acknowledge my contributions to your wedding and your life with Carlos. And I expect you to remember that the money Carlos will inherit was built through hard work and careful planning, not luck or entitlement. I can do that. I want to do that. And Ashley? I expect you to raise my granddaughter to understand that people's worth isn't determined by their job titles, their bank account balances, or their social status. I expect you to teach her that respect is something you give to people based on their character, not something you withhold based on their circumstances. Ashley nodded, fresh tears streaming down her face. Maria, I'm so ashamed of how I've behaved. I'm ashamed that I let my prejudices and my upbringing blind me to who you really are and what you've accomplished. Shame isn't productive unless it leads to genuine change, I said. What matters now is what you do going forward, and whether you're capable of becoming the person Carlos needs you to be. We spent the next 2 hours talking about practical changes Ashley could make to demonstrate her new understanding and commitment. She would call the expensive vendors and cancel contracts, forfeiting deposits if necessary. She would plan a new celebration that reflected their actual budget and values as a couple. She would involve me in the planning process as Carlos's mother and as someone whose opinions and preferences mattered. Most importantly, she would have a completely honest conversation with Carlos about what she had learned about herself and what she wanted their marriage to actually be based on. "There's one more thing," Ashley said as she prepared to leave my house. "I want to make a public apology for what happened at the baby shower." "What kind of apology?" "I want to post on social media about what I learned about making assumptions about people based on their professions. I want to acknowledge that I was completely wrong about you and that I'm grateful for the lesson you taught me, even though it was embarrassing." "Ashley, you don't need to humiliate yourself publicly to make things right with me." "It's not about humiliation, it's about accountability. The people at my baby shower heard Rebecca call you the maid, and heard me go along with it. They should also hear me acknowledge that I was completely wrong and that my behavior was unacceptable." After Ashley left, I called Carlos to let him know about our conversation. "How are you doing?" I asked. "I'm confused, I'm angry, and I'm trying to figure out whether I'm engaged to the woman I thought I was engaged to, or whether I've been in love with an idea of someone who doesn't actually exist." "Ashley came to see me tonight." "She did? What did she say?" "She apologized. She acknowledged her prejudices and her mistakes. And she asked for help planning a completely different kind of wedding." "What kind of wedding?" "One that reflects your actual values and financial situation as a couple rather than her desire to impress her social circle with an expensive celebration." Carlos was quiet for a moment. "Mom, do you think people can really change? Do you think Ashley can become someone different than who she's been for the past 2 years?" "I think people can change when they're genuinely motivated to change and when they understand the consequences of not changing. The question is whether Ashley is motivated by love for you and respect for our family, or by fear of losing access to your inheritance." "How do I tell the difference?" "By watching her actions over time, rather than just listening to her words. By seeing whether she follows through on the changes she's promising. By observing whether she treats you and your family differently when she thinks no one important is watching." "And if she doesn't change?" "Then you'll have to decide whether you want to spend your life with someone who sees your family's success as her personal opportunity rather than as a responsibility to be shared and preserved for future generations." 2 weeks later, Carlos called to tell me that Ashley had indeed canceled the expensive wedding and was planning a much smaller celebration. "She wants to have the ceremony here, at your house," he said. "She said it would be more meaningful to start our marriage in the place where I grew up, surrounded by the people who actually care about our happiness, rather than people we want to impress." "And how do you feel about that?" "I feel like maybe I'm finally seeing the woman Ashley is capable of being rather than the woman she thought she had to be to fit into my life." The wedding took place in my backyard on a Saturday afternoon in June. With 40 guests instead of 200, home-cooked food instead of professional catering, and flowers from my garden instead of expensive arrangements from high-end florists. Ashley wore a simple dress she had bought with her own money rather than the designer gown her mother had offered to purchase. Carlos wore a suit he already owned. I performed a reading during the ceremony, a passage about building a life together through mutual respect, shared values, and the understanding that love is demonstrated through actions rather than words. During the reception, Ashley stood up to make a speech that surprised everyone present. "6 months ago, I thought I knew what I wanted in a marriage and what I needed in a mother-in-law," she began. "I thought success meant spending money on impressive celebrations and marrying into families that could provide financial security and social status." She looked directly at me. "I was wrong about almost everything that matters. I was wrong about what makes a celebration meaningful. I was wrong about what makes a family valuable. And I was especially wrong about Maria Santos." Ashley's voice grew stronger and more confident as she continued. "Maria isn't just my mother-in-law. She's a successful businesswoman who built a company from nothing through intelligence and hard work. She's a real estate investor who accumulated significant wealth through careful planning and smart decisions. She's a mother who sacrificed for decades to provide opportunities and security for her son. She paused, clearly emotional but determined to finish what she wanted to say. Most importantly, she's a woman who taught me that respect has to be earned through character and actions, not demanded through circumstances or social status. I'm grateful that she held me accountable for my prejudices and gave me the opportunity to become someone worthy of marrying her son. The guests applauded, but I noticed that Ashley's eyes were on Carlos throughout her speech, watching his face for his reaction to her public acknowledgement of everything that had happened between us. Carlos was smiling, not the polite social smile he had worn at Ashley's elaborate baby shower, but a genuine expression of pride and love for the woman Ashley was working to become. After the wedding, as guests were leaving and we were cleaning up the backyard, Ashley approached me with an envelope in her hands. "Maria, I have something for you." She handed me an envelope similar to the one I had given her at the baby shower, but this one had my name written on it in her careful handwriting. "What is this?" "It's a legal document. I've set up a college fund for our daughter, and I want you to be the trustee. I want you to control how the money is spent and when it becomes available to her." I opened the envelope and saw that Ashley had established a $60,000 education fund for her daughter, money from her own savings and a small inheritance from her grandmother, not from Carlos's trust fund or her parents' resources. "Ashley, this is a very generous gift." "It's not a gift. It's an acknowledgement and an investment. I want our daughter to grow up knowing that her grandmother is someone to be respected and learned from, not someone to be patronized or dismissed. And I want her to understand that financial security comes from building something yourself rather than spending other people's money or depending on other people's success." Ashley nodded seriously. "I have a lot to learn about both of those things. I hope you'll teach me, and I hope you'll teach her." Chapter 4. Building Something Real Together. 6 months after Ashley and Carlos's backyard wedding, I was sitting in my expanded home office reviewing the financial reports for what had become our family business. Ashley had surprised everyone, especially herself, by asking to learn about the practical aspects of running a cleaning service and managing rental properties. "I want to understand how you built all of this," she had told me 3 weeks after their wedding, appearing at my door on a Tuesday morning with a notebook and